Chapter 4. Angela's front door was festooned with pink balloons. Mum walked up the path with Bertie hopping after her like a giant pink jumping bean and rang the doorbell. Mrs. Nicely came to the door. "Hello," she said, and then, "Oh, good heavens," as her eyes fell on Bertie. "I'm an earthworm," Bertie explained. "Ah, ah, how lovely, Bertie," said Mrs. Nicely. "Do come in." He showered clods of earth onto the carpet as he bounced into the hall. Most of Angela's friends had come as princesses and fairies. The front room was a sea of pink tutus. "You're here, Bertie," said Angela, running up to him. "I'm a fairy. Look, I've got wings." "I'm an earthworm," said Bertie, "and I've got you a present." An arm emerged from the sleeping bag holding a scruffy package. Angela tore off the wrapping paper. "Thank you," she thrilled at the top of her voice, dropping the face paints on the big pile in front of her. Bertie gazed at them longingly. "Let's play a game," said Mrs. Nicely. "Who wants to play musical statues?" "Me," chorused the fairies and princesses. The music played and they all danced around the room. "Bertie isn't dancing," moaned Angela. "Yes, I am," said Bertie. "This is how earthworms dance." Bertie rolled over and over on the floor so that the dancing fairies had to jump over him. The music suddenly stopped. "Statues, everyone! Statues!" cried Mrs. Nicely. The fairies and the princesses became wobbling statues, but Bertie, who was feeling a little hot and dizzy, hadn't been listening. He just kept rolling straight into one of the fairies. Laura wobbled and fell onto Angela. Angela wobbled and fell onto Maisie and Claire. Soon all the statues had collapsed into a heap, and Bertie rolled into a halt at Mrs. Nicely's feet. "Did I win?" Tea was pink, biscuits were pink, pink ice cream, and a pink birthday cake too, in the shape of a heart. Bertie ate worm style by licking things off his plate. Can you see him? "Bertie, please don't slurp like that," sighed Mrs. Nicely. "Sorry," replied Bertie. "Worms can't help it. They don't know about manners." When tea was over, Mrs. Nicely surveyed the mess on the floor. Most of it had collected under Bertie's chair. "Can we go out on the bouncy castle now?" asked Bertie, tugging at her sleeve. "In a minute, Bertie," she said. "Angela, why don't you go next door and play with all of your presents?" While Angela's friend played with her little pony pat set, Bertie eyed the face paints. Maybe he would try just one. He wriggled an arm out of his sleeping bag and selected the black face paint. He drew on his chin and looked in the mirror. Next he drew on his cheeks. Perhaps he would turn himself into a vampire or a zombie. Or better still, he was so busy that he didn't notice that the room had gone quiet. Now, can you see him? "Oh, Bertie," said Angela. "Ah," said Bertie, "I was just, borrowing them." "What have you done to your face?" "I'm a slug," said Bertie. "You said you were a worm." "I was, but now I'm a slug. A big, black, slimy slug." He slithered on the floor, making slimy, sluggy noises. Angela's friend shrieked with delight and ran to hide behind the curtains. Angela peeped out too, her eyes shining. "Make me a slug too, Bertie," she pleaded. Mrs. Nicely was still tidying up when the doorbell rang. Thank goodness it was over for another year. She went to answer the door. Bertie's mum stood on the doorstep with 3 other parents. "I do hope Bertie's behaved himself," she said. "Oh, yes," said Mrs. Nicely. "He's such a lively boy." She led them through to the back door. "They were all playing in the garden," she said. "Angela has had such a lovely time. They've been as good as—" Mrs. Nicely stopped in her tracks. 8 children were bouncing on the bouncy castle, but the princesses and fairies who had come to the party had vanished. In their place were green, ugly monsters with filthy tutus who looked like they'd crawled from a swamp, and in the middle of them was Bertie, bouncing and whooping. And there they all are. "Look, Mum," said Angela, "I'm a creepy caterpillar. Bertie did it." Mrs. Nicely looked at Bertie's mum. The other parents looked at Bertie's mum too. Bertie's mum looked at Bertie. "What?" said Bertie. Back in his room, Bertie was glad to be reunited with Arthur. Personally, he couldn't see why everyone had made such a fuss. What was the point of giving him some face paints if they weren't allowed to use them? "Anyway," he told Arthur with a smile, "I don't think I'll be invited next year." He considered it. Really, the party hadn't turned out so badly. He felt in his pocket and brought out something pink and sticky. "Look, Arthur," he said, "I saved you some cake." And there they are at the end. I hope you enjoyed the story of Dirty Bertie Worms. Bye.